Downtown St. Louis before the arch. We'll take a look back next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter, and welcome to City Corner. Well, we're taking a look back at the history of St. Louis today. Our guest is Ron Els, also known as radio's Johnny Rabbit. Ron, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Steve, very much. Great to be here. Great to talk about the past all the time.
Right,
it's fun.
Radio host, author, king of trivia. What else are you?
I don't know, nothing else. Once in a while I help people write books or write a book or two, and do a lot of work with the Missouri History Museum, a lot of programs. At least once a month we do a special presentation about the history of St. Louis at the History Museum. The most recent one was on coffee. I mean, coffee was a huge business. It still is big, but it was gigantic.
Until that exhibit, I didn't know that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it paralleled the success of the shoe industry, of the brewing industry, back in the 1890s into the 1920s in St. Louis.
Then you're going to do another program, speaking of the History Museum, on December the 10th.
Right. Thursday, December the 10th, 10:30 to noon. And these programs are all free, which makes it very nice. And a lot of people bring groups to come in. We're in a large auditorium, so we can handle as many people as want to come. The next program is called On with the Show, and it's going to be about showbiz in St. Louis. Pictures of movie stars, TV stars, people who went to Broadway, the theaters, a lot of pictures of theaters. There are a lot of theater buildings. I've got 30 current theater buildings in St. Louis that are no longer theaters, though. There's something else. But we'll have all of the original photographs of these theaters, and we'll have some special guests, and we always do some trivia for some wonderful prizes, and people have a good time. And they enjoy it, and it's a great way to get away, and also a great time to go to the museum and then look at other things.
Right. That's December the 10th.
Yes.
Well, the reason you're here today is because we're talking about downtown St. Louis before the arch, and this is a presentation that you've, I guess, shopped around town for a while.
Yeah, we've just done it once, and we will be doing it again sometime next year, probably in the summer. But the idea came from, at the History Museum, there's a very big exhibition on the arch, the building of the arch. As a matter of fact, recently they had a lot of the people there that worked on the arch, that built it.
Because this was the 50th year, of
course. Yes, 50th anniversary. So we decided to go back beyond that, before the arch, not necessarily related to the Jefferson National Expansion Memorial or the riverfront, but some about the riverfront. And you know, what was downtown like? Everybody knows what it has been like over the last 50 years since the arch, but what was it before that period of time? So most of our time was spent in 1850 to the 1920 period.
And I guess the images that we're going to look at, do they all come from the museum?
Yes, all of the images are in the museum, property of the museum, in their wonderful library, and it's just one of the great treasures of St. Louis that few people ever go there. It's at 225 South Skinker. It's in the old United Hebrew Temple, just across from Forest Park. So it's not, a lot of people think, well, that's in Forest Park. No, this is a separate building. And they have a library, their archives, their underground storage, which is not open to the public. But the library is open for anybody to do research. Now, you can't borrow books, and you can't use the photographs unless you pay a fee. But if somebody wanted to go in and say, I'd like to look at pictures of Soulard. There was a Dr. Swakowski, who was not a professional photographer. He was a dentist who spent decades photographing St. Louis, especially South St. Louis, and lived in the Soulard area. So there are resources like that people can say, oh my gosh, there's my house or some other house. Joy from the Fountain and Locust, where incidentally they have the Johnny Rabbit Monkey Malt, which is a good healthy thing. I know you're into health food.
I am into healthy food.
You can't beat that.
Yes.
Chocolate banana malt. But she just bought a house in the Soulard area that belonged to a Dr. Franz Arst. who was a very eccentric but very famous and successful doctor. His house dates to 1875, and it was featured in their 1875, I think the exhibit's still up, Walk Through 1875 at the History Museum. So she wanted to find out pictures of the house and the area, so she went there and found exactly what she was looking for.
That's a great resource. Well, let's look at some of the images you brought today, and this is downtown St. Louis before the arch, and you can put it all in context. And I think the first image we have is right there. Lucas Place, is that it?
Let's see, that first image now, we have to go through my notes because now we've, okay, that was the Sound Money Parade passing by the house. It's a four-story house in the center with a cupola on the top. That belonged to a guy named Rufus Lackland. Rufus had a little money. He was actually a multi-millionaire, and he was president of Boatman's Bank. Now, this was in 1896. This parade was passing by his house on its way to the Republican National Convention, which was in St. Louis in 1896.
Fascinating. Let's go to the next one.
All right. Well, a couple of kids there. You know, these are the days before people had the luxury of bathtubs and showers in every house, or even indoor plumbing. The girl, it was thought that the girl had lice in her hair, which wasn't uncommon then and still happens today. So she was getting a creosote coal tar shampoo which contained lye and camphor, was probably very aromatic. But it just, you know, that's the kind of photos we find at the History Museum, and they're not all buildings. Sometimes they're people whose names are lost in time or are never even documented.
We take indoor plumbing for granted, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Let's go to the next one.
Well, this you know, the city was teeming with people, far from being filled, though, with the well-to-do. An example here, this was on a Saturday in the 600 block of Biddle. The year was 1910. There are 5 street urchins on the right who look as if they could do with the hot bath that the little girl had before. And that is the little girl there, that cute girl on the left. Now, she looked like she's sort of been scrubbed on with Seaman soap and looked okay, but she was the one that ended up in that wash tub we saw before.
You know, you talk about wealthy places, St. Louis. During the time frame of these pictures were taken, late 1800s, early 1900s, what were the fancy areas, like Lafayette Square, I guess?
Oh, yeah, Lafayette Square was very, very fancy. Lucas Place was the first real big private place, directly west of downtown, really starting about 14th Street and going west for a few blocks, because all of the people wanted to get away from the noise, the pollution, the hubbub of, you know, everything was packed into
the air pollution was notorious back then, wasn't it?
Gosh, it was incredibly bad, and it kept getting worse and worse. And the smells of manufacturing, the soap manufacturing, the things there was no zoning like we have today. So the rich folks started moving west. And then in that western move, they started to go farther to Vandeventer Place was the next, but Lafayette Square and Benton Place, and those were also being developed at the same time, and St. Louis Place on the north side. And then later on, things would start to move a little more toward Kings Highway with Hortense Place, Lenox Place, and then across Kings Highway to Westmoreland and Kingsbury.
Right. We're talking about downtown St. Louis before the arch. Let's look at some more images that Ron Ells has brought, courtesy of the Missouri History Museum.
Well, it's time for lunch. This is a soup kitchen, a big soup kitchen. Now, a lot of people look at this and say, well, obviously that's in the Great Depression. It is not from the Great Depression. Or maybe it's Reverend Larry Rice's New Life Evangelistic Center. It is not that. This was in 1913. And this was in a period of time that there were a lot of people out of work. This happened in a hall that was adjacent to St. Mary of Victory's Church, which is at 3rd and Gratiot, a Catholic church, the second oldest Catholic church in St. Louis, which is still there and still used as a Catholic church.
So was it just soup?
I don't think so. I think they might have had a little more than soup. Well, we were talking about the Sound Money Parade going up in front of that house on Lucas Place. They were headed here to this frame building. Nobody will remember this building. It was only there for a short time. It was a temporary wooden structure for the 1896 Republican National Convention. Off to the right, you'll see City Hall. So this is on the east side of City Hall at 12th and Market. But City Hall was not yet finished at the time. That was still under construction. They were going to use a building called the Exposition Building and Music Hall in the 1300 block of Olive, but it was in, for whatever reason, wasn't that old, but it was in kind of a rundown condition, and they decided to build this building. Cost $60,000. They had it built in 60 days. There's some letters around on the sides of the building, and that indicated to the people coming there that if they, whatever their ticket was, if they were ticket A22, they knew to go into the A section. And that's where they nominated William McKinley, the presidential candidate and winner.
Ron, it's obvious you have a love of the history of St. Louis. You were born here. I know during your radio career you spent a lot of years other places.
Yeah.
California, and I can't remember all the places you've worked, but...
Well, it would sound like a train engineer.
Right. But didn't you, if I remember my history right, didn't you grow up on the Hill?
No, my family grew up on the Hill. My
Okay.
family's from the Hill. I grew up in Flora Place, right at Tower Grove, right at the old entrance to Shaw's Garden.
But you have a real love for St. Louis history. What's so special about it, do you think?
Well, I think it's a special city. It is a city that has always meant so much, as it does today, to the United States. It's the center, it's on the river, it's the heartland, was the opening of the West. So many things have come through here, going in all directions. You know, we were just talking before about the coffee. Because of its location, in the 1880s, 1890s, St. Louis was the largest city closest to Mexico. So
Really?
coffee was distributed very heavily out of St. Louis into Mexico, Mexico City, and so on. So there is just so much history, and fortunately, so many people trying to preserve the history, like Landmarks Association, the History Museum, and all our historic sites.
Let's look at some more images of downtown St. Louis before the arch. And Ron, you can tell us what we're
All
looking
right,
at.
let's see what we have there. Oh, yes, this is 1920. That's the is a building that is long gone. It was 19th and Locust. It was actually considered to be St. Louis Music Hall and our first art museum. The suffragette movement was going on at that time, and they had was a city, state, and national convention here to get the passage of that women could vote.
Right.
When they won the vote, this was early in 1920. The vote was taken, and they won the vote in August of 1920, which is weird to think about, that before then, women couldn't vote, and it's not that long ago. Very
It's
interesting.
amazing. Really, yeah. It's an interesting part of our history, and so much of it happened right here. Let's go to the next.
All right.
Now that looks familiar to me.
Well, that's been gone for a while. That's in
I've seen the picture, though.
1915. And that was at 3rd and Surrey Street on the southwest corner of 3rd and Surrey. That's where the Dent family moved.
Julia Dent?
Yep, Colonel Frederick Fayette Dent. He was a fur trader on the river. This was actually a pretty nice house in its day. Just 2 blocks from the Eugene Field House, which is at Broadway in Surrey, which is a museum, has been a museum since 1936. Then when the Dents really started making money, they built Whitehaven in the county and moved there. Their daughter married U.S. Grant. That was in 1868. Colonel Dent was visiting the White House in 1872, and he died there, actually making him the first Missourian, or the only Missourian to die in the White House, just as a visitor. That house is long gone, long before the Jefferson National Memorial Project, and would have been a little bit south of that.
Well, we need to take a break, and when
All
we
right.
come back, we're going to talk more about downtown St. Louis before the arch with Ron Ells. So stay with us. We'll pick up on that right after this.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
The odds of this daughter of a clergyman spending 11 weeks at #1 on the U.S. singles charts? 1 in 19 million. The odds of going on to win 6 Grammy Awards? 1 in 1.4 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 110. I'm Toni Braxton. and I encourage you to learn the signs of autism at autismspeaks.org.
I'm Steve Potter. Welcome back to City Corner. Our guest today is Ron Ells, radio's Johnny Rabbit, KMOX, Saturday nights, Route 66, a little music, a little talk.
Yeah, mostly music.
Right. You've written how many books of trivia? I don't know.
Oh, just a couple trivia books, but I've been involved with lots of books. Sometimes a foreword or an introduction.
I've read probably
editing.
10 forwards by you in other people's books over the years, at least.
It's kind of strange, but it's fun to do. I enjoy it.
So are you connected with the Mound City Publishing?
Yes, Mound City Publishing is a consulting firm for authors so they can own their own property. So it doesn't belong to a publisher. They own it. They can make more money with it that way. We worked on books like Stray Rescue, Recipes to the Rescue, Famous Firsts of St. Louis.
Right.
One that's coming out, it's called Hooked on Crack, Why Liberals Are Winning, by Ben Hilliker. Yeah, a very conservative look at politics and the educational system in the United States. And another that he wrote called A Tale of Willie Willis, which is a kid's book.
So I had him on this show for that.
Really?
That was great.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Love Willie.
Yeah.
Well, what we're talking about today is downtown St. Louis before the Arch, and we're looking at images courtesy of the Missouri History Museum. So why don't we look at a couple more? Let's look at two more, and then we've got a little trivia to do.
All right, take a look. Oh, there was a terrible, terrible situation there. As you can see, that place is a wreck. That's a big fire. It was basically called a MAC building, Missouri Athletic Club, and Boatman's Bank was also in the same building. It's the aftermath, day after the fire. A lot of people working, cleaning up a tremendous amount of debris in the street. The fire happened on March 12th in 1914, and to this day it was the deadliest fire in the city's history. 30 men died in the fire. And today, the current Missouri Athletic Club is built on that very same piece of property, which is the northwest corner of 3rd and Washington.
We were talking about the advantages of indoor plumbing. Fire safety's come a long way too since 1900.
Yes, it has.
Yeah, exactly. Let's look at another image. All right.
Well, there's a lot of rubble there.
Yeah.
Just to the right, you'll see the last section of the wall. It's all that remained of the raised Exposition building and music hall, which we had mentioned before. That had occupied this building site for 24 years, which really wasn't a long time for a major building. It was built in 1883, torn down in 1907. The St. Louis Public Library's central branch is on that site now, the little sunken Missouri Park on the left. The building we see directly in the center is Christ Church Cathedral.
Oh.
The bell tower to that was added in 1912 to the left, so it physically looks a lot different, and it actually looks a lot better today than it did then. The bigger building in the background on the left is the original section of the Jefferson Hotel.
Interesting. Let's look at one more.
Now, I always like this picture. I like it because of the shadow of the dome. When you go through the pictures at the Missouri History Museum, you'll see a lot of pictures of downtown from higher elevations. But that shows the dome, so they did this on the latter part of the afternoon. The point of the dome is facing toward the Merchants Exchange building, which was a very, very big building. What's there today is the east section of the Hyatt Regency Hotel. Merchants Exchange at the time was actually the largest indoor space in the United States. It was built in 1875, demolished in 1958, and it was the site of the 1876 Democratic National Convention.
Well, before we look at some more images, want to play a little trivia?
Okay.
I'm doing this.
I'm ready.
I'm doing this at the risk of looking very foolish.
I'm ready to answer.
Because, no, I thought you were going to ask me.
Oh, darn it. Okay.
Me asking you would be a no-brainer. You would know. So you want to test my knowledge
Oh, sure.
and see if I can get any of these right?
Okay. Let's talk about, now these are not necessarily before the arch. Which of the following vessels did not sink? The River Queen, Belle Angeline, the USS Inaugural, or the Santa Maria? One of those did not sink. Was it the River Queen?
On the St. Louis Riverfront, you mean?
On the St. Louis Riverfront. The Belle Angeline, the USS Inaugural, or the Santa Maria?
Well, I know the Santa Maria did.
Yes, it did.
Because I remember that from being a kid. I'm going to say the Belle.
You're right. The Belle Angeline did not sink. River Queen did. The Belle Angeline also became known as a river club, and the inaugural, which the skeleton of the inaugural is still sunken in just a little bit of
I think they need more old boats down the riverfront. That's my two cents. Yeah.
Do they ever?
You want to ask me another one?
Well, I want to just mention something here, if I can find it in my stack of notes about the riverfront. I was just making this morning. I probably left it somewhere. The amount of boats that were there were the yacht club, of course, the Admiral, the President, the Lieutenant Robert E. Lee, and things like the Burger King boat and the McDonald's boat. I mean, it just went on and on and on. The whole river was lined, and it's kind of a ghost town right now.
There were some people that were trying to bring the goldenrod back, and that fell apart just a few months ago, I think.
There was no hope of that. Absolutely no hope.
No.
It was a pipe dream. Could not have been saved.
Just too far gone, you mean?
Way too far gone. It would have been impossible to save it. But the people wanted to save it because it was a national historic
I miss the
landmark.
Admiral.
Oh my gosh, the Admiral. I think more and more people miss it today than. Well, here's a different question about downtown. Trader Vic's Polynesian restaurant was a big deal when it opened in St. Louis in 1963, and a hotel that was built in 1963. There hadn't been a lot of building going on since the 20s downtown, so this was a big deal. The Trader Vic's was in what downtown hotel?
I don't think I've ever heard of Trader Vic's.
Really? Oh,
So,
you missed something.
what was down? I'm trying to think of the famous downtown hotels. Was it the Brown Hotel?
Well, this was the Bel Air East. The Bel Air East was right next to the MAC, just east of the MAC. It's a different name today. The hotel is still there.
All right, well, I'm 1 for 1, so ask me one more and see if
All
I
right,
can
one
see if I can get
more.
it.
Well, since you're in broadcasting, I'll give you a radio one.
Uh-oh.
What radio station was owned by the St. Louis Star-Times newspaper? It was signed on the air in 1938. The signal still exists. The call letters are not the same. They were originally in the newspaper building at 12th and Delmar, which is now 12th or Tucker and Convention Plaza. And then they moved in 1956 to North Kings Highway.
That's not KMOX.
It's not KMOX.
Right, because KMOX was like on Hampton or something.
KMOX at
right?
one time was on Hampton.
So
right,
on
very good.
Hampton.
It was KXOK. And
Yeah, they were. In fact, you were working at KXOK when I moved back to St. Louis in the mid '80s.
Yes, it was. Now, at that time we were not there. It was an area called
Clayton.
Radio Park, which was like a little park setting across.
Right. When you worked there, they were in Clayton.
Yeah, the 7th building,
Right.
16th floor of the 7th building.
Okay, 2 for 2. I'm going to stop there while I'm ahead.
Okay.
Let's look at some more images
Sure,
that you
of
brought
course.
from the Missouri History Museum, and this is downtown St. Louis before the Arch.
Well,
Snowshoes.
Yeah.
We may need those before long.
that's what I was thinking. Snowshoes, but wait a minute. These are not typical snowshoes. These are snowshoes for horses.
What?
Yeah, horses. You know, those poor horses had to be out, and there was ice and snow. So this is a company that was their big deal. They couldn't buy them retail, whatever that meant, wholesale only, snowshoes for horses.
Wow. Did they have matching hats and jackets? Or we don't know about that.
I don't know.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Speaking of boats.
Speaking of boats, we're down at the riverfront this time. The Spread Eagle, the Gray Eagle. This was from the Eagle, a couple of boats from the Eagle Hackett Company, which was based in Alton, Illinois. It gives you just a look at how busy the riverfront was. Now, this was at the time of the World's Fair. This was 1904. Initially, you might look at this and say, well, maybe 1870s, 80s, but still 1904, and the riverfront was very busy.
It's beautiful. Let's go to the next one.
Speaking of the riverfront, there is a flood on the river, which is not unusual. This was in 1896.
That's a flooded street, though, isn't it?
Well, that's the levee.
That's the levee.
That's the actual levee with the gangplank coming from the riverboats.
Oh, I see.
And then flooding the first row of buildings. This is long before flood walls were put in. So this was a fairly common occurrence, unfortunately. And you can see all the smokestacks. Just think of the pollution coming out of all the smokestacks just from this small section on the riverfront, which was adding to our great pollution downtown.
Wow. Let's look at the next image.
There's it's a color. It wasn't originally color. It was doctored in, a lithograph of downtown from Lucas Place. looking east toward the riverfront, and you can see just how many buildings were just all the way down there. This was the house in the center belonged to Henry Kaiser. He had worked in plotting things in the Mississippi, outlining how the river could be improved with Lieutenant Robert E. Lee. He was a surveyor, and he became the city's first engineer. In the background in the center is the steeple of the Second Presbyterian Church, and off to the right there's a building with this 4 tower things with bulbous type tops. That was just called the high school.
It's hard to imagine, what the views must have been like then, but back then when like a 4 or 5 story building was tall.
Oh yeah, right.
You must have had a whole different view, but it's beautiful.
It's interesting how they did these bird's eye views. I have no idea. Was it a balloon or was it just an artist's imagination?
Yeah, I wonder. I don't know. Let's go to the next one.
Let's take a look at that bridge. Now that bridge that's being built on the left was, or is, Eads Bridge.
Right, yeah.
Under construction, but Mother Nature intervened and created an ice bridge, which was not uncommon. In those days, the river seemed to freeze over more than it does today. And this ice bridge lasted for several weeks, and that's where people were getting across the river that way, because the ferries, the Wiggins Ferry Company was a big ferry company in St. Louis. The ferries weren't being able to get through. The bridge wasn't finished yet, so people came across back and forth from East St. Louis to St. Louis using this ice bridge. I mean, wagons, people, horses, dogs, whatever.
I wonder who the first person that tried that was, because that seems like it'd be a crazy thing to even think about.
It does, it really does.
I mean, do you want to be out in the middle of the Mississippi when all of a sudden there's no more ice?
You go right through.
Right. Let's look at a couple more images.
Okay.
St. Louis, downtown St. Louis, before the arch.
Before the arch. Things that went on downtown.
We may be out of images.
Out of images?
So, but we've got lots to talk about, though.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Want to go back a little more trivia? St. Louis trivia?
Oh, sure, we can do some trivia. I've prepared some questions for you. Robert Campbell, Campbell House Museum. Yep. That's 15th and Locust. Locust was Lucas
And we've just
Place.
got a few seconds here.
And what business was he in? How did he make his money?
Gosh.
Robert Campbell.
I'm embarrassed I don't know that.
He was a partner with William Sublette, fur trading. He was a big fur trader. And if people haven't seen that house, it is the most authentic historic house.
Well, if people have been interested in what we've talked about and what they've seen today, I encourage them to check out the Missouri History Museum.
Yes.
And we'll have contact information. Don't forget about Johnny Rabbit's show, Ron Ells' show, Saturday nights on KMOX, Route 66.
Yes, sir.
And also on December the 10th, it's On with the Show at the Missouri History Museum, 10:30 till noon. And Johnny Rabbit will be hosting that too. And it's always a pleasure to see you. And thanks for keeping us up to breast with the history of our great city.
Thank you, Steve, very much.
Ron Ells, always good to talk to you. I'm Steve Potter. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.